We have with us John Bracken, who's the Executive Director of DPLA, and also Michael Della, who is the Director of Technology with DPLA. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And perhaps next year we will see you in person, and I'll do a better job at planning ahead of time. We'll let you go ahead and start your presentation because we don't have a lot of time. But I think as we discussed, you'll have around 10 minutes. And because you started early, you can go up to 15 if you want to not get done 5 minutes early. And then we'll have 10 minutes for Q&A. So I'll let you start if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sorry,
thank you.
And
if you have a presentation slide deck,
yeah, Michael's gonna pull up the slide
okay,
while
perfect.
I tap dance for a second.
No worries.
Can you guys first? Can you hear me? Okay, because I know it's hard to read a room when presenting. Okay.
Yes.
Good. Thank you
And,
for those of you in the back.
And can you see it? You can see us.
Incredibly helpful. I think the main thing, how many of you were in the room when Michael and I presented in December? Just so I have a baseline. A couple of you, or last year. Okay, a couple of you. Well, so, I mean, thanks so much to Kinza and all of you for the invitation to be here with you. As Kinza noted, I would love for various reasons to use it as an excuse to come visit you in person at some point. But I'm excited to be able to pipe in, and I appreciate you guys allowing us a chunk of your valuable time during a really busy time of year. I think one of the things I guess I wanted to highlight for those of you that weren't in the meeting in December, what Michael and I were talking about was a moment of transition that we were in as an organization at DPLA, and we were, I'm basically asking for your patience while we made that transition and outlined for you some of the goals we were hoping to achieve in the coming months. And I think today, what I would like to do is reflect and share with you the achievements that we've made, and Michael and his team in particular over the last few months since we spoke to you 6 months ago. And also then, slightly more, in slightly illusion fashion, share with you, basically we've got exciting news coming down the pike that is not quite ready to fully unveil, but we can refer and share with you a little bit about some of the directions that we're excited about and why we're excited to do that with you.
Hey,
if
John.
That makes sense, I will ask Michael if he can pull up the slides. So far I see your laptop.
Yeah, John, we don't see any slides at all. It's just a big black screen. Yeah.
Sorry. I think it's because there's no presentation mode outside of full screen, unless I'm mistaken, John. So I might just have to share the window with some border stuff on it.
There is an option just to share the full screen. Okay, yeah, we can see it now.
Sorry about that. Let me get back to the beginning. I tried to hide some things and now,
Nice.
All right, does everybody see that?
So,
Yes.
So maybe what I will do, so the short version is, we launched 6 years ago. We're in the mode right now where we're mapping out, you can go to the next one, Michael, where we're mapping out what our next stage is going to be. This is our mission is going to stay the same. Our mission from our founding is what we're building off of in the next couple of years. Continuing to empower people to learn, grow, and contribute. And I think the signal primary achievement that we've made as an organization and as a set of partners and as a movement over the first 6 years is building out of a national network of which you all are a core part from before its existence, actually. And what, I guess what I'll touch upon briefly is a little bit at a high level, some of the progress we've made institutionally in building out that network. We're now in 41 states. The national coalition of hubs, again, of which MWDL is one, and representing over 4,000 partner institutions across those states. And I'll talk a little bit more near the end about our plans for continuing to grow and expand and strengthen that work. More immediately, we've onboarded, several states have joined in the last few months. Most recently and most excitingly, I guess Tuesday or Wednesday, we announced that Vermont had gone live as our newest hub, which is something we're really excited about. And we have about 4 or 5 states in formation that are in the formation of finalizing and coming together as hubs, and we expect that to come together the next few months or the next year.
John, really quick.
So that's something, yep.
Really quick, how many members do you have right now, hubs? Because I was confused about the number yesterday when I was doing a report on DPLA. Or,
Sorry, can you say that again?
do you know how many members do you have right now who are actually have signed the contract with you?
Yeah, let's see. So so I always count the number of states we have totally. I think the number of members of the membership program, which includes some non-state hubs, places like NARA and some other, and Internet Archive, I think is around, I don't know, Michael, I'm blanking on what the exact number is. It's around 2 dozen. Michael, do you know the exact number right now?
It's
I
okay.
don't know off the top of
It's
my
all right.
head. I think it's even slightly larger than that.
I'll figure out that number before we hang up in the, but so these are the hubs coming online. And so just so people are clear, because we're talking about hubs and networks, and we often I have a tendency to slide into internal speak. When we think of our network, we really think broadly and think about the diversity of those 4,000 institutions that are represented through those 41 hub organizations. And we know that the range of those organizations range from the National Archives to community college libraries in rural Pennsylvania, for instance. So let me turn it over to Michael and ask him to talk a little bit about just sort of instrumentally where we are.
Sure. Okay, so right at this moment, as of, I guess, a couple days ago, actually, we are at 34-something million items in DPLA. And if you look at our growth over time, this graph is a little skewed because our numbers in 2013 and 2014 were recorded as of DPLA Fest rather than the first of the year, but you can see that we're actually kind of taking off. We're on an upswing here, and if this graph were extended into mid-2019 where we are, you'd see that this slope would continue. We're really managing to add a number of records at a good clip, excuse me. So this corresponds to about 60% year-over-year growth, which is doing pretty well, and a big chunk of that is related to our sort of getting our technology stack in gear in terms of our ingestion system, which I'll talk about in a little bit. In terms of reuse, which I know is a theme for this event, we have roughly 10% of our items have machine readable right statements assigned to them. That's maybe right statements with a lowercase r in the sense that they also constitute Creative Commons licenses as well. But in terms of reuse, this is really important for folks to be able to know what they have and drill down on things that are actually reusable. And so we think that that's a really important program that's continuing to grow. Alongside of that, on the reuse front, we have roughly 1.2 million API hits since we started counting last summer. And so those are API hits outside of DP.LA. These are folks that are using our API for other purposes. So that's another reuse metric. We've, in the last year, started rolling out some member services that are more expansive than, what we traditionally did. Currently, I'd say in production, we have DPLA Local, which is a service that we provide for members that allows them to host a white box version of the DPLA search and discovery interface, essentially a portal with their branding containing the records that come from their domain. So we have 4 of those live right now, and the service is open to any member who wants to turn that on. As I mentioned earlier, the ingestion project that we've been working on for the past couple of years has really yielded dividends in terms of our operational capacity and our ability to recover from failure and produce reports and things like that. I'll speak about that in a second. And finally, our analytics dashboard that went live late last year, but now we've extended the range of it so that a representative at a hub can offer accounts to contributors at that hub, so that the scope of that is actually expanded quite a bit. So just going to talk briefly about DPLA Local. Here are some screenshots of the 4 portals that we have live. The first to go live, which is in the foreground here, was Recollection, Wisconsin. And that allowed them to migrate from a server that was trying to be retired by the folks that were hosting it. We think that we have been able to provide, increased usability of that collection. And, it's replacing a cost at Recollection, Wisconsin, a cost center for them. So I think it's sort of a win-win. We are working on implementations of this for Digital Library of Tennessee, for Sunshine State Digital Network, and Illinois Digital Heritage Hub. So, this is a program that's expanding as well. And then finally, in terms of data ingestion, a lot of this centers on our Ingestion 3 project, which we mentioned last time. And we kind of came up with a way of talking about this, and it's the 7 values of Ingestion 3. One is cost savings on our part, in the sense that we are not running a lot of infrastructure that drains our resources. 2 is the flexibility, in the sense that a lot of our previous work was really stymied by sort of inflexible architecture that made it hard to do our work. 3, maintainability we ran into a number of problems in terms of our ability to maintain the software we're running, and it would sort of be subject to bit rot and fail over time. And we've really realized some benefits from moving over to this. 4 is quality. There were a number of aspects of the way that our previous systems were built that just basically did not control the data very well, and so we're able to produce higher quality records without weird schema mistakes or things like that. If there is a problem, we're able to fix it really quickly. 5, reliability. We're just able to keep up with the data that folks are contributing to us, which is really important. It's just sort of core part of our business. 6, reporting. We produce a full suite of reports every time we do an ingest. So if that's something that Mountain West wants to see, we'd be happy to provide those every time. It basically gives you a list of every field and every value for every field, and it really slices and dices the data in a way that lets you see just basically everything that we saw. And finally, 7, speed. We've realized several orders of magnitude speed increases with our new infrastructure, which means that we really can keep up with everybody, and it's not a drain on our resources to maintain these processes as they run. So finally, the analytics dashboard. Here's just a couple of screenshots of this if you haven't been on. As I said, we are now able to offer sort of federated accounts so that we can provide, Mountain West can provide accounts for every contributor that is under their domain. Obviously, I'm showing California Digital Library's screenshot here, but one of the things that we're providing here are breakdowns of stats by contributing institution. You can see this in the top left, each of the fields metadata completeness scores are available and so forth. So, there's some information there to help folks compare their metadata records to one another and to increase quality in places where it's lacking. Looking forward, we are unable to quite announce this, but we're lined up for funding around a push to produce a few more services. And what we have on the docket is the potential for offering a IIIF hosting service. So when a hub would like to provide IIIF endpoints for their records, but they are unable to host it themselves or it isn't feasible, we would like to be able to provide that for them. The second major thing is a curation toolkit and platform. So our ability to package up some of the work that we've done around how to produce curated primary source sets and exhibitions, and also a platform to do that kind of authorship. And finally, DPLA custom, which is going to be similar to DPLA local, but would be centered around a theme rather than the administrative domain of a particular institution. And so the idea there would be that we would be able to help you query and identify records that should be in a specific themes portal, like Umbra Search, for example, and to be able to host that for you. So I'm going to pass the mic back over to John, and he'll talk about community leadership.
Yeah, and so just briefly, I think part of the real value that the network has given to us lies in a couple areas. I mean, one is through the community leadership process that we've set up and really only activated in a really active way in the last few months, I think, gives us a pipeline and a connection to the work happening across the country, and really allows us to be a network rather than an organization working nationally. And I think that shift is really important, and it's one that I anticipate and hope that we really double down on and grow for lots of reasons. I think it's important. For one reason, I think it just makes the work better and more impactful. For another, part of the reason it makes it more impactful is it gives us a structure to be in conversation and dialogue and working with people like you in an intentional way. And I guess to walk through these slides, what that structure looks like is a national council, a network council, we call it, of representatives from all the members, as well as a smaller advisory council, which is represented here, with whom the network council meets about quarterly. The advisory council we meet with monthly. And the value of both those conversations, both those venues for conversation, but both those networks and communities for our work, I think has been invaluable. One other element I'll just say that in addition to that, the membership has been incredibly important as a proof point, as a data point to share with investors and other people who are interested and curious about our work. So Michael made allusions to a grant that we just recently learned about that we're in the process of preparing to announce. So I don't mean to be mysterious here, but one of the real values in the conversation for that grant and some other ones we have in the pipeline is being able to point to an engaged, active, and paying membership network as one of our core, as our core asset. The other element, or the other kind of organized way that makes itself manifest, is through working groups. We have 5 active working groups right now, with some discussion on possibilities of forming some others. One of the really nice things that I've seen begin, in the last year or so, the agendas for the decision on which working groups to create and the agendas for the meetings and the agendas for the work are not set by DPLA staff sitting in some central office in Boston or Chicago or in an airport, but rather through dialogue and community-led, which means a lot for me and for us. I think I'll stop there to make sure that we maximize time. If you guys have conversation points, other than maybe what I will do is just really briefly share with you 3 things that I'm excited about at the broad level. Michael shared with you the specific level of what some of the things we're thinking of for the coming year. But 3 things coming out of the conversations we've been having about our new strategy that I wanted to highlight. One is we know that we are an organization that partners. Collaboration is the essence of what we do. We only succeed when our partners do. So we're going to be putting that front and center of everything that we do. Second, despite the tenor of our times and concerns, valid, legitimate concerns about the negative impact that the digital age is having on our society and on American democracy, we are fundamentally optimistic about the roles that technology, the potential for technology for being a positive set of tools for increasing the availability of knowledge and unleashing creativity. That's core to our founding, and it's something we want to continue to hold. And the last bit, we know that we have impact when we empower communities. And in particular for us, as we look towards the coming years, is we want to ensure that we're creating pipelines so that every institution and community, in non-institutional community-based archive or library that wants to have a pipeline into the national repository that is DPLA has one. And they have that. And in particular, we're going to be looking to put a special emphasis on working, uplifting, empowering when we can, aligning ourselves where we can with communities that have historically been marginalized and distanced from conversations like the ones that we've been part of. So I'll stop there, and since I imagine we took a little bit more than the original time we were hoping to, but I wanted to give you guys the full picture, kind of as full a picture as I could of where we're starting from right now.
No, thank you. And actually, because you were able to start a little bit early, we're doing great with time. So I'm going to start taking questions, and then you can see the audience, so you'll see me walk to the people with the questions, and then if you can't hear, just let me know. All right. Who's going to go first? There's more candy for.
And Kinza, just to go back to answer your question, the answer is 28 of members, current members in the network.
Because the number that I saw was 41, which was for the hubs. 41
is the number of states represented in the network.
The states represented.
Broadly.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I have your first question for you from Ryan from Arizona Memory Project. Actually, I think everybody should introduce themselves so I don't.
Sure, yeah. Hi, I'm Ryan Airforth. I'm with the Arizona Memory Project. So I had a question. So you're talking about how DPLA's now got, 34 million items and some change. So with the Memory Project, we've got, quote unquote, only 75,000 items, and we have plenty of problems with discoverability. So I was just wondering, what kind of, I guess on the technical side or the discovery side, how are you sort of making those 34 million items findable, or what kind of challenges you sort of have, with people possibly getting lost in there or seeing 35 million things and getting intimidated by so many records. So just wondering how you guys have been handling that kind of issue.
Sure.
Yeah, Brian, I think, I'll preface, I think I got about 2/3 of that question, Brian. I'll just say the 2/3 of the question I got from you is the core question that we're wrestling with right now on a staff level and with the advisor council, this broader question of how do we drive use. But Michael may have heard the other third of the question and or have a more detailed answer.
Yeah, I think the crux of the question was, if Mountain West is a small portion of the overall integration, how does Mountain West ensure that their participation isn't being lost in this humongous pile of things? And I guess the story I have to tell around that is the biggest increase in items that we had over the last couple years was based on a new export of data from NARA, and they went from something like 2 something million to something like 10 million And we were concerned when that came. I mean, obviously it's great to have all that material and, you know, they're a really important institution, but we were worried about this sort of problem exactly. And so what we ended up doing is building an entirely duplicate DPLA and ingesting their data alongside everybody else's. And then we had folks who were really familiar with doing some of the curation work that we've done, spent some time going through all that material and making sure that it did not actually end up being like, you know, 50% NARA items. And what we found is that the diversity of topics in the aggregation mean that, you know, a wide variety of things are just not in your search results. And so just by searching, obviously you're winnowing down the area of stuff you're looking at, and depending on the theme you're looking for, you are going to find things from different institutions based on their strengths. So really, if you went looking for stuff that only Mountain West Digital Library provides, you will find Mountain West Digital Library right at the top. The second thing is that even for things that did cross over between, sorry, that's my dog, between, you know, an institution like NARA and an institution like Mountain West, one of the things that ended up being really important is that items that have richer description with more fields covered end up rising to the top in the search results just based on the way that search relevancy ranking works. And so we might have, you know, thousands or potentially millions of items from NARA in the case of, I think it's military records. But if, you know, stuff has been described more verbosely than happens in an archival context, that ends up rising to the top of the search results rankings. And so it isn't really evident that having such a big collection from NARA is actually eclipsing anybody else. So that was what we were looking for before we greenlighted that ingest, and it turned out to be true, and I think it remains true. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes. Okay. Other questions? All right.
Hi, it's Teresa at Mountain West. So I think one of the things we talked about a lot at DPLA Fest this year was the importance, and I think we can see this with the dashboard, the importance of things like primary source sets, exhibitions and so on in driving use. And I know with your the recent reorganization and staff changes at DPLA, I'm not sure if that's being supported right now. And I know across the network it seemed like a lot of folks want that. So I know you're planning on the DPLA content portal. Is there anything else that you're doing currently that would help support that angle of DPLA?
Do you want me to take this one, John, or do you want to?
Whoever, whichever. I'll take a. It's all right. Yes, I heard the same. We've heard the same things both before, during, and after DPLA Fest, and thank you for coming. I would say, you know, broadly, a couple of things. One, yes, we've seen that that's where there's a lot of value. I mean, two, as I probably mentioned at DPLA Fest, one of the things that allowed us as a staff, as an organization, to devote staff time to that was having dedicated funding to focus on that work. That dedicated funding ended a long time ago, and we're trying to figure out how to stretch that out. You know, we're pursuing and are pretty close with one possible funding that will allow us to do some more there. But at the same time, as I alluded to earlier in my remarks, I think we're at a point where we really, the value is in the network, not in our staff, as great as our staff is. And so one of the things we want to do is help take on the charge of creating the means and mechanisms on our end to enable folks to create the types of materials or curated materials that they want to create to take advantage of whether what's in their own collections or what they're seeing emerge from other folks. And so, you know, again, what that looks like and how that plays out is going to depend, and we're having conversations about that, you know, both internally and within the network. But Michael might be able to speak more to that.
I think that really nailed it. I think that in general, use is important, and you know, we've been fortunate to receive funding to work on some curated elements at DPLA, and we hope to be able to continue that. But I think in general, we want to drive use as much as possible, and so one way is, you know, opening up the ability to work on that across, you know, really the country and not just the network. And the other is, I think, you know, trying to find other ways to drive use in terms of representing DPLA's collections in other places and making sure that our search index visibility is working well and things like that. So I think we definitely feel that use is really important to the life of the project, and we're going to focus on that across the board and in as many ways as we can.
Thank you. I can think of one question which may be something a lot of us here, or some of us may be thinking about too. As times change, so do the strategic directions of institutions, organizations change a little bit. And I know there's a huge partnership right now with Lyrasis on ebook services and developing that project. How are you balancing and prioritizing your resources between cultural heritage projects and your ebook projects? And we just have a couple minutes, so if you want to just summarize that real quick, if you're able to, that would be great.
Sure. I would say that, you know, you're right. It's a question we get often. I think the core answer to that is the work that Michael and I just walked through has been and continues to be our core singular project. We can and are happy to arrange a separate presentation on the ebooks partnership that we're doing primarily with New York Public Library, and Lyrasis is part of that, and then some other consortia have signed on to be part of an advisory network to that, which is, you know, driven by our history and our founding and wanting to be seeing the need for a provider and the need for libraries, museums, and archives to be at the table as digital platforms for libraries are being built out. And that partnership has a goal of enabling libraries and librarians to curate their own e-content, starting with ebooks, but working through into audiobooks and potentially other formats. And so, you know, that work, as I said, that, you know, partnerships are core and essential to what we do. That's an essential. The partnership there is driven by some of those entities and a set of partners that we're growing in the coming weeks and months. I guess I'll address directly, because this question has come up, that the funds that, and I need to put this delicately, we have relative to the goal of the funding we receive through things like the ebooks work are to go back into the larger work of the organization, the abundance of which is the work that Michael and I were just talking through. And so no staff, you know, we haven't diverted from one area to focus on another. If anything, we see part of the reason we're excited about the possibilities in this ebook collaboration is the possibility of it increasing our ability to do our work more broadly. Is that helpful?
Yes, it did. And perhaps one day we can arrange for a webinar for you to talk more specifically about ebooks, and that would be great. I know Teresa and I were at your DPLA Fest, so we actually were able to attend that session, and that was very interesting. Well, thank you, Michael and John, so much for taking the time. As always, we appreciate that. And you know, I'll continue to ask the Hub Network and our member network here, and in case other questions come up, I'll just send them your way. So.
Yeah, please do. Or you know, also we're both somewhere on those slides is our Twitter IDs, and I'm Bracken at dp.la, and Michael is, I think, Michael at dp.la.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great meeting. Thanks for doing what you're doing, and have a great summer.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. You as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.